Modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Has plenty of ways to mash together two monsters together and get a new one, but nothing will ever quite replace the original fusion summon. So if you haven't played a deck that uses the fusion mechanic, well, now's a good time to change that. So in this video, I'll be introducing 5 different fusion-based Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks that you can build. I tried to create a mixture of new and unique archetypes that approach the mechanic in different ways, so I think there's something here for everyone. Before we get into it, I'd really appreciate a quick like on the video and maybe a sub to the APS Amplifier channel, because there's plenty more where this comes from. The first deck is Branded. Now, there's a lot to say about this deck, so I kind of wanted to just get it out of the way first. The deck all centers on Fallen of Albaz and Branded Fusion, a spell that lets you fusion summon using monsters from your hand, field, or even the deck. You'll be making one of several different dragon-based fusion monsters, but the two most prominent ones are Lubellion, the Searing Dragon, and Albion, the Branded Dragon, both of which let you make even more fusions. From there, you're basically aiming for Mirror Jade, the Ice Blade Dragon, which is the deck's go-to boss monster. It's got a really disruptive effect that lets you send any fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz from your extra deck to the graveyard and banish a monster in the field every other turn. And if your opponent gets rid of Mirror Jade somehow, it'll destroy all their monsters at the end of the turn. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. This deck mixes extremely well with archetypes like Despia and Bestials, and specifically Alibur, the Jester of Despia, can search any branded card from your deck. That's usually going to be your Branded Fusion, but there's also Branded Lost, which is a continuous spell that protects your fusion summons and lets you get another Albaz-related monster from your deck whenever you do, or any number of other strong branded spells and traps. The Bestials, meanwhile, are dragons that you can summon from your hand by banishing a light or a dark monster from your graveyard. They synergize around the Bestial Lubellion, which can search any of the others to your hand and also dig out your continuous branded spell and trap cards from your deck too. Like I said, there's just a lot to say about this deck. I didn't even mention how cards like Blazing Cartesia factor in, and even let you pivot this deck into something like a synchro strategy if you want. I'll just sum it up by saying that Branded is easily one of the most open-ended fusion strategies in the game right now, and I'll leave you to do your own research and find out which variant of the deck speaks to you the most. The next deck is Heroes. They're a fan favorite from Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, and they've been modernized to compete really well today. Your plays usually start with cards like Elemental Hero Stratos, Vision Hero Vion, or Elemental Hero Shadow Mist, each of which gathers more resources to your hand and graveyard to fuel your fusion summons. Heroes can make use of the classic polymerization, plus their own Miracle Fusion, Fusion Destiny, and plenty more. You'll be making fusion bosses like Elemental Hero Sunriser, who searches out Miracle Fusion, powers up your monsters in the field, and can even pop a card when your other hero monsters battle. Or Absolute Zero, who actually destroys all your opponent's monsters when it leaves the field. Then there's things like Destiny Hero Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, a card that debuffs your opponent's monsters and can destroy cards every single turn, making it really disruptive and hard to get rid of since it can also come back whenever it's destroyed itself. One of the cool newer bosses is Wake Up Your Elemental Hero. It gets a huge attack boost for all the materials that you use to make it, it can attack multiple times, and it even has an insurance effect when it goes. The best part about Heroes is that they've got a lot of variants to explore too. Like I mentioned before, you can add a Destiny Hero route to it, but there's also Dark Fusion and the Evil Heroes, like Malicious Bane, or even taking a Neos-based approach that focuses on making the different Neos fusion variants and all the support that they've gotten recently. Hero decks in general are very consistent since they have access to loads of starter cards, and their combos are resilient to just single bits of disruption like one Ash Blossom. That said, the deck's aggressive nature is more suited to going second and trying to OTK the opponent outright, since its best boss monsters lack effect negation against the opponent. So it's a little bit tougher to go first. And like Branded, this is another one of those archetypes where there's just a lot of different room to explore, so have a closer look and see which variant fits you the best. Next, we've got Fluffles and Frights. The Fluffles are your main deck monsters, these stuffed animals that mostly help you gather resources for your fusion summons. That's Fluffle Bear, Fluffle Dog, Fluffle Penguin, usually being your go-tos. They also work in tandem with the continuous spell Toy Vendor. It helps you cycle through the cards in your deck and draw in the process. But there's also the edge imp monsters. They're literally dangerous, sharp objects like chains, scythes, and scissors, and edge imp monsters facilitate your fusion summoning into the deadly Frightfur fusion monsters. Frightfurs are aggro monsters with effects that usually give them power-ups, extra attacks, and card removal. For example, making Frightfur Tiger takes edge imp sabers and then any Fluffle monster you want. When you do, it'll destroy your opponent's cards equal to the number of fusion materials you use, because you can use more than one, and clears the way for a powered up attack. Some other useful fusions you'll be making are Frightfur Kraken, Frightfur Cruel Whale, and Frightfur Sabertooth. This deck was a fan favorite for a long time because of the cute to creepy aesthetic and its ability to OTK the opponent reliably when it goes second. And thanks to cards like Frightfur Patchwork, you can actually search out edge imp cards and polymerization together, making this one of the more consistent fusion strategies too. I definitely recommend it to anybody who's looking for something kind of similar to Heroes, where you're able to finish a duel very fast. Next up, we've got Dragon Maids. They're cute dragon monsters that handle the household chores like cooking and laundry, that is until the battle phase kicks in. Each Dragon Maid monster has two forms. Their regular forms are these low-level dragons that handle the housework by setting up your hand or graveyard with more resources. But during the battle phase, you can return them to your hand to make their big dragon forms. For example, Parlor Dragon Maid becomes Dragon Maid Lorpar. The dragon forms, of course, have much higher stats and they're better suited for battle, and then afterwards you can return them back to your hand in exchange for a smaller form again. Okay, cool, but you're probably wondering where the whole fusion part of the equation comes in. Well, Dragon Maids have Dragon Maid Changeover. It's a spell that lets you fusion summon and can even recycle itself every turn. The two major fusions that you're going to be making are House Dragon Maid and Dragon Maid Show. House Dragon Maid gives you a free extra dragon every standby phase from your hand or graveyard, and whenever one of your dragons returns to the hand for any reason, like their own effects, she'll let you pop a card in the field too. And her upgraded form, Show, also gives you a free dragon every turn, but it adds in the ability to negate your opponent's cards. When you do, Show will return back to the extra deck and bring House Dragon Maid back in its place. Dragon Maid swapping between setup and aggression makes them a pretty good mid-range deck, but it also is one that has serious offensive power when it needs it. And Dragon Maids work totally fine on their own, but they're even better because since they're dragons, they get a huge amount of synergy when you use them with cards like Bestials. Now, a commonly overlooked but really unique fusion strategy is Predaplants. They're an archetype of plant monsters that place predator counters on your opponent's monsters. Predator counters reduce a monster's level down to 1, which hinders most Xyz and Synchro and ritual-based strategies. But more importantly, most of the Predaplant's fusion effects let them use an opponent's monsters that have predator counters on them as material. Predaplant Clemedesundu, I'm sorry if I butchered that name, is a perfect example. Predaplant Biblist and Opher Scorpio are also other sources of consistency and card advantage. And one of my favorite cards is Predapractice. It's a spell that lets you start combos and get more cards all in one. So what are a few of the standout fusion monsters? Well, you've probably seen a few of them used in other decks thanks to super polymerization, but they're even actually better in their home deck. Predaplant Dragostapelia can quickly distribute predator counters, and it outright negates the effects of any monster in the field that has one. Predaplants also make use of the Starving Venom fusion monsters like Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. A few other standout fusions are Predaplant Chimera Fleecia, which actually searches for fusion spells when it leaves the field, and Ambulomelides. Sorry again, these names are hard. But the cool part about Predaplants is that they're all plant monsters. So you can combine them with other plant archetypes like Rika, or just use generic plant support cards like Lone Fire Blossom and Aromaseraphy Jasmine. Now, admittedly, Predaplants are a bit more awkward to use than other decks because the predator counter mechanic is a little bit weird, but I think they're still very capable and fun regardless. Alright, I've also got a few quick honorable mentions too. Shaddolls are a set of spellcaster monsters that have both flip effects and effects when they're sent to the graveyard by a card effect. They've got several different fusions that combine a Shaddol monster and then another monster of a particular attribute, and the most notable one is El Shaddol Winda. It's a complete floodgate against special summons. They work fine as their own strategy, but you'll more often see them combined with other fusion decks. Another deck is Invoked. It's basically just Alistair the Invoker, Magical Meltdown to search him, and the spell card that he searches, Invocation. which brings out one of several different fusion monsters that all have strong effects, like, say, Invoked Mechaba. Similar to Shaddoll's, they work best as a complementary engine to other decks. And I'd be remiss not to mention TR Elements. When they're sent to the graveyard, they actually fusion summon by shuffling themselves and the other materials back into the deck. Thanks to recent banlist hits, the deck can't really function all that well on its own, but it's another great companion piece to add to other graveyard-based strategies. Alright, so that's your primer on some fun fusion strategies that you can build in Yu-Gi-Oh! Let me know if you've played any of these decks yourself and what you like the most about them. And of course, there are plenty of other archetypes that I'm sure I missed, so feel free to share them in the comments as well. I'm making similar videos to this one with suggestions for Synchro and Xyz based decks, so check those out too. And subscribe here to APS Amplifier for more Yu-Gi-Oh! Videos.